Unveiling 5 incredible secrets of Mesopotamia, transformative tales you never knew existed. The storm outside lashed against the old windows of Sarah Hayes' classroom. Her heart raced as she anxiously rearranged the artifacts she had unearthed from her grandfather's dusty attic. Artifacts that could revolutionize her teaching. However, their presence felt like a double-edged sword. Was she ready to face the fiery repercussions that came with challenging the school's outdated ways? The echoes of the school board's recent warnings lingered heavy in her mind. Fall in line, or else. But every student in her class, every silent, hopeful face, deserved more than rote memorization and standardized tests. Yet, as she turned the clay tablets over in her hands, her own fears clawed at her. What if she failed them like so many before? As the months blurred by, a new tension enveloped her classroom. That once uninterested student, Jamie, now ignited with passion, never missed a chance to explore art inspired by those Mesopotamian bowls. But their growing engagement only drew the ire of the administration. They demanded results, standardized test scores, that reflected a perfect alignment to their rigid curriculum. Sarah felt the pressure balloon inside her, belief battling disbelief. Would she drown under this weight? Could her love for teaching withstand such scrutiny? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Yet, in the midst of the turmoil, Sarah glimpsed glimpses of transformation. The quiet girl who had once melted into the background presented astonishing research on ancient irrigation techniques, while her classmates hung on every word. But was it sustainable? With one ultimatum from the board after another, her heart twisted painfully at the thought of jeopardizing the students' passion. Her own creativity pitted against the weight of tradition. If she didn't adhere to the old rules, everything she dreamed to build could shatter in an instant. It all came to a head during the board meeting, a chaotic battleground of ideals and negligence. Facing a wall of scornful faces, Sarah stepped forward, courage battling uncertainty. Instead of withering under their glares, she lifted her chin and unleashed a torrent of belief. Education was not about feeding numbers into a machine. It was about nourishing swords and shields, igniting minds with curiosity and unshackled dreams. She felt the artifacts behind her, those clay tablets almost humming with the ancient echoes of civilizations past, urging her on. As her words filled the cold room, a deep anguish clawed at her insides, taunting that this might all be for nothing. Her brave speech hung in the air, but the board's hardened expressions remained unchanged, shifting the tension higher as Sarah grappled with her choices. What if she stood her ground, only to see it all collapse? The stakes could not be higher, yet amidst the chaos, the artifacts loomed, whispering their ancient secrets. Could history indeed forge a path of hope for her students? As she locked eyes with her class, filled with potential and dreams that yearned to break free, it became irrevocably clear. Either she risked it all to awaken their future, or she let it dim in the shadows of complacency. Her heart shook with uncertainty. Would she break through for them, or would their futures slip away, unnoticed like shards of pottery buried in the earth? The following days felt surreal as Sarah walked the halls of the school, her heart still racing from the recent board meeting. The ghosts of that evening's tension haunted her, whispering doubts during every quiet moment. As she passed by her classroom, she could almost feel the weight of the artifacts resting there, their silent urging both comforting and burdensome. Did they truly hold the power to enact change, or was she merely clinging to fragile hopes? Her decision to confront the board had rallied her students. Their enthusiasm ignited a wildfire in her once static teaching approach. Jamie's artwork now adorned the walls, now flourished with vivid colors, breathing life into ancient history. Yet, as glimmers of incredible growth emerged, Sarah couldn't help but question if her courage would ultimately lead them into a storm of danger or a new dawn of understanding. Time slipped away, every lesson threatening to morph into a battle against the looming pressure from administration. Students flourished and faded, their eyes filled with wonder or concern as they observed Sarah's increasingly unsteady demeanor. Her lesson plans danced on the edge of innovation, but every experience brought the cold reminders of standardized tests that loomed like dark clouds above her classroom. In a quiet moment before class, Sarah revisited her grandfather's artifacts. Each piece carried messages that spoke directly to her desire to transcend the barriers built by outdated traditions. She pushed through her fears, determined to make those lessons resonate within each student. What if they learned there was more to education than tests? What if history became a canvas through which they could paint their own futures? But deep doubt gnawed at her heart, whispering cruel questions. What if she failed to inspire them? What if the board's threats silenced her ambitions? When the bell rang, disrupting her thoughts with a sharp clang, she straightened her back, pushing these anxieties aside. Her students filtered in, sensing the palpable energy in the room. Every inquisitive face reminded her of her purpose. She was not merely an instructor, but a guide leading young minds through uncharted territory. It was then she noticed a different tension swirling amongst them, whispers and giggles, excitement and uncertainty. Jamie, as animated as ever, shushed the class before waving his hands excitedly. "Miss Hayes, can we have a discussion about our own discoveries on Mesopotamian art today?" The request sent ripples of exhilaration through the classroom, a pulse of collective curiosity that Sarah had longed for. "Of course," she replied, feeling the spark return within her. "Let's explore together." As she maneuvered through their conversations, she watched them feed off one another, their lively discourse elevating her spirit and weakening her doubts. Yet with every passing enthusiasm, the unsettling tension with the school board persisted. One misstep, and Sarah could see the enthusiasm flicker like fading candlelight. She needed a strategy to protect the new engagement she'd fostered. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her as she tried to balance transformation and compliance, inwardly wrestling with a profound question: was adherence to those rules worth sacrificing their passion? As she listened to Jamie elucidate the emotional connections his artwork had with the ancient world, a flame ignited within her, a resolve to protect what they had reclaimed. The risks were still daunting, but for the first time, instead of succumbing to the daunting waves of anxiety, Sarah began to formulate a plan, mapping out every step she could take to safeguard this newfound vibrancy in her classroom. Yet lurking at the back of her mind was a chilling certainty. What would happen when the board came knocking again? The stage was set for a reckoning, and deep down she wondered if her own transformation could withstand the pressures of institutional inertia. Determined to take action, she resolved to prepare for the confrontation she felt brewing on the horizon, one that could either seal her fate or illuminate a new, bold path. But would she be ready to face the consequences of choice? The days following that charged lesson blended together as Sarah stepped into a new rhythm, each day commencing with fresh prospects fueled by her students' enthusiasm. Yet beneath the surface, a simmering tension buzzed through her spirit. The urgency to nurture creativity was now in direct conflict with the demands that loomed from the administration. Doubts formed like storm clouds, threatening to overshadow her efforts. But Sarah was resolved not to be swept away. With each passing class, the artifacts in her room became more than relics. They transformed into instruments of empowerment, The classroom walls dripped with the colors of Jamie's excitement and the thoughtful interpretations of their collective discoveries. Sarah found moments to weave the narrative of Mesopotamia into the very fabric of her students' identities. It was exhilarating, but also perilously close to rebellion. Inspiration surged through her, feeding her hunger for innovation while taunting her fears of failing to stay within bureaucratic boundaries. One afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, Sarah found herself alone, poring over lesson plans. They blossomed with excitement but became quagmires of compliance in the face of standardized tests. A tightness wound around her chest as she questioned herself again. Should she continue weaving history with art, leading her students into an exploration of imagination, or should she toe the line to protect her position? In that moment of quiet desperation, Sarah reminded herself of the power of storytelling. Those ancient tales had the ability to illuminate truths and foster empathy, a compelling lesson for her students and perhaps for herself. What if they could journey into Mesopotamia as an epic sandbox where they could question, create, and dare to challenge the status quo? As she made notes, the door swung open, interrupting her thoughts. Jamie burst in, holding a piece of his artwork depicting a Mesopotamian city. "Look, Miss Hayes, this captures the spirit of the marketplace." Sarah's heart swelled. In Jamie's piece, she saw not just enthusiasm, but an embodiment of the passion she had struggled to maintain. "Incredible," she exclaimed. "Tell me about what you imagined when creating this." Talking with Jamie struck a chord within her, a reminder of why her students mattered and how education could stir the soil of potential. Yet she was constantly reminded that such forward movement could attract the scrutiny she was already trying to evade. As the class continued, Sarah unveiled a mini-project, allowing the students to research various facets of Mesopotamian life and present their findings artistically. They could create skits, artwork, or even music. Excitement crackled through the air as their ideas began to emerge, feeding each other's aspirations like a vibrant tapestry. But as the enthusiasm bubbled, she could not ignore the ticking clock of administrative review. Would the board recognize the academic rigor in their projects, or would they see only the risk of deviation? Part of her felt empowered by how far she had come, yet another part quaked at the potential fallout. That afternoon, Sarah sat at her desk, her heart racing as she prepared for the next board meeting. She knew she would have to articulate not just the value of a creative approach, but back it with hard data proving its worth. It felt bold, nearly reckless, yet a wave of resolve surged within her. With every sentence she penned, her insight transformed from tentative to assertive, each word reinforcing her belief that education must embrace depth over metrics. As she reviewed her draft, a notion struck her. No more hiding behind cautious measures. She would approach the board with clarity and courage. But doubts nipped at her heels again. Could she stand before them, prepared to confront their objections? As she mulled over complex strategies, a new question emerged. What new revelations might arise by confronting the board directly? The stakes were rising, but so too was her determination. Sarah felt torn, yet exhilarated. Was she finally ready to seize the opportunity to redefine education in her corner of the world? The hour was approaching for reckoning, and the air was sharp with anticipation. The only question now was how strong her voice would be when the moment arrived. The boardroom loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of her classroom. As Sarah stood outside, her heart thudded against her ribcage, an internal drumroll marking the approach of a pivotal moment. The polished mahogany table inside gleamed like a trophy, but for Sarah it signified the battleground for her vision of education. She had rehearsed the key points 100 times in her mind, yet self-doubt still wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. Taking a deep breath, she entered. Faces turned toward her, some filled with curiosity, while others registered skepticism. This was the Council of Decision-Makers, the gatekeepers of educational change. They were poised to either grant her the freedom to innovate or thwart her dreams with bureaucratic constraints. The stakes weighed heavily in the room, and Sarah felt tension reverberate through her bones. As she launched into her presentation, listing the mini projects her students had crafted, Sarah's voice wavered slightly. But as she described the artistic interpretations of ancient civilizations, her passion ignited the atmosphere. These aren't just projects, she insisted, they're gateways to connection and empathy. My students are not merely learning about Mesopotamia, they're finding themselves within its stories. The rhythmic cadence of her words began to weave through the room, captivating the audience. Colleagues nodded, and the initial apprehension in their faces began to soften. But one board member, a stern man with a reputation for prioritizing test scores over creativity, interjected. "But how do you quantify this? What proof do you have that this approach leads to measurable improvement?" Caught off guard, Sarah felt the wind knock out of her sails. She had anticipated questions, but hadn't prepared for his challenging tone. In that moment of vulnerability, doubt rippled through her, matching the thunderous clamor of her heart. Yet a flicker of inspiration struck. "What if I showed you that creativity and academic performance aren't at odds, but rather symbiotic?" she retorted, channeling her earlier revelations. As Sarah continued her argument, she emphasized her students' newfound engagement and excitement, weaving anecdotes into her evidence. Jamie's immersive artwork had inspired others to articulate their understanding with depth. "Isn't fostering curiosity and resilience the true measure of success?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. The atmosphere in the room shifted, tension palpable as minds began to weigh her words. But the stern man remained unmoved, unfazed by her enthusiasm. His futuristic gaze focused on the data, and Sarah sensed the looming threat. This board member was skeptical of her approach, driven solely by numbers rather than human stories. Did her emotional arguments hold enough weight to outweigh hard metrics? A willingness to confront this dilemma dawned on Sarah, pushing aside her anxieties. She locked eyes with him, reiterating, "Test scores do matter, but I believe they flourish in an environment where students can explore freely. My classroom is not just a place for rote learning." With each word, her stance crystallized. It was not merely about proving her method with existing data, but rather convincing them to embrace the humanity behind the learning experience. As discussions began to swirl around the board table, a mixture of voices filled the air, some supportive, others critical, but Sarah felt herself standing firm. Hope began to lace through her uncertainty, and her strategic plan solidified in her mind. She wouldn't just fight for her classroom, she would advocate for an entire philosophy of education that valued creativity and authenticity. The meeting drew to a close with a promise of further review and discussion, but not before the board acknowledged her passionate plea. As she stepped out of the room, the adrenaline surged through her veins, validating the risk she undertook. Yet beneath this triumphant rush, a nagging thought crept in. What changes might this spark in the educational landscape, and how prepared will she be for the potential backlash? The crossroads ahead felt significant, but Sarah was no longer merely surviving the storm, she was learning to wield its power. As Sarah walked away from the boardroom, the adrenaline surged through her, but so did a fresh wave of apprehension. What felt like victory now appeared to her more like a precipice. Advocating for a new educational philosophy was uncharted territory, and the thrill she'd felt moments ago began to dissipate, replaced by a steady drumbeat of anxiety. In her classroom, she was the unassailable captain of a ship, guiding her students through the tempest of learning. Here, she was entering the choppy waters of administration, where every decision was scrutinized, every innovative idea weighed against stringent standards. The very thing that ignited her passion, creativity, stood in stark contrast to the rigid metrics that seemed to rule this new domain. Back at her desk, amidst the clutter of papers and textbooks, Sarah began to rewrite her strategic plan. She thought through each point carefully, her fingers tapping dutifully on her keyboard. She needed to cultivate data that accompanied her triumphs, not just testimonials from students and parents, but solid evidence that could resonate within the confines of quantitative evaluation. She envisioned charts and graphs that would illustrate the connection between creativity and academic improvement. Amidst this pivot towards a data-driven approach, a deeper realization churned within her. Sarah had spent her career fostering individual voices in her classroom, nurturing imagination and curiosity. Why should the corporate oasis of the boardroom be any different? The very essence of her methodology needed to maintain its heartbeat in this new context. That evening, a sudden inspiration struck. What if she invited the board members directly into her classroom? An opportunity to see firsthand the transformative power of her creative endeavors. A live demonstration. Students engaged in multidisciplinary projects, expressing their understanding of Mesopotamia through art, literature, and science. Sarah's heart raced at the thought. This could be the bridge between her vision and the board's need for concrete results. She spent the next few days preparing for this initiative, her excitement pooling into every lesson plan. Her students would become ambassadors of their learning, showcasing their efforts and demonstrating the tangible results of a creative classroom. This wasn't just an invitation for the board, it was an open door to their own engagement with learning. As she mapped out the logistics, Sarah faced an internal conflict. The board's skepticism weighed heavy in her mind. What if they couldn't recognize the brilliance in her students' work? What if her attempt to show off their talents backfired? Strong doubts threatened to undermine her resolve, and she knew she needed to steel herself against potential rejection. The foundation of her teaching philosophy depended not only on the creativity she nurtured, but also on her ability to present that creativity in a compelling manner to those with whom she faced resistance. Moments of self-doubt clawed at her confidence, but she fought back with affirmations of purpose, reminding herself that this was a critical step towards empowering her students and reshaping perceptions of educational success. With the date set for the board's visit, anticipation coursed through her veins. But a new wave of anxiety emerged. Would they see what she saw, or would they reduce their experience to mere numbers? As she prepared her students for the board members' arrival, she noticed them whispering excitedly, their eyes shining with the promise of sharing their hard work. In their enthusiasm, Sarah found a wellspring of strength. They carried the future she fought for, an educational landscape where creativity flourished alongside performance. The day of the demonstration arrived, and Sarah stood at the threshold of her classroom, her heart racing again as it had done in the boardroom. This was the moment where worlds would collide, administrative skepticism meeting the vibrant creativity of her students. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, her resolve sharpening, but a distant echo of uncertainty whispered, would this be the turning point she aspired for, or would it lay bare her worst fears? And as she welcomed the board into her world, a question loomed, unanswered. Could she truly transform their perceptions, or would she remain an enigma trapped between two conflicting educational philosophies? The classroom hummed with a mix of nervous energy and focused determination as Sarah welcomed the board members. Their expressions were unreadable, a blend of skepticism and curiosity. She caught a glimpse of her students as they prepared their presentations, their enthusiasm igniting sparks of hope within her. They embodied everything she believed in, the potential for innovation and creativity that defined learning as far more than mere numbers. The first group stepped forward, presenting their project on the construction techniques of ancient Mesopotamia. Each student took turns explaining the significance of ziggurats, showcasing their models adorned with intricate designs. Sarah watched the board members intently. One leaned forward, a hint of interest sparking in her eyes. Perhaps, Sarah thought, this could be the moment when the organic learning her students embodied began to penetrate the veneer of administrative caution. As they moved through the presentations, Sarah noticed how her pupils were not just reciting facts, but she felt her heart swell. This was the fusion she envisioned, the melding of creativity with critical thought, forming a canvas that encapsulated true comprehension. With every presentation, she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. But as the final group began their demonstration, self-doubt clawed at her again. Had she put too much faith in the ability of her students to convince those who wielded majority power in the educational system? Could the raw emotion and creativity displayed really challenge the rigid metrics that dominated their evaluations? She grappled with a wave of anxiety that threatened to choke her excitement. After the presentations concluded, Sarah opened the floor for discussion. A board member with a reputation for challenging innovative ideas, Mr. Thompson, raised his hand. Her pulse quickened. Would he question their findings, dismiss the potential of what she had so carefully curated? "Impressive work," he began, his tone surprisingly measured. "But how do you quantify the success of this approach? What are the viable metrics to assess this kind of learning?" As he spoke, she felt exposed. The issue was larger than mere metrics. It was a philosophical battle that struck at the core of her beliefs as an educator. Responding required not just data, but a bold conviction in the power of transformation through creativity. "Mr. Thompson," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt, "the success of these projects isn't just in the scores they produce, but in their engagement and the critical thinking skills they develop. Look at how they collaborate, how they draw connections across disciplines." While Sarah spoke, she saw the tentative nods around the room. Some looked at their notes, contemplating her words. She grasped this moment, knowing that she had come here not just to explain, but to advocate for her students and the educational approach she held dear. "I believe that education needs to foster not just knowledge, but the ability to apply that knowledge creatively in real-world situations," she pressed on. "These students aren't just learning about history, they're envisioning it through their own lenses." As she concluded, feeling both fatigued and exhilarated, a warm pulse of satisfaction flickered within her. Perhaps this had been the moment she had longed for, a chance to transcend numbers and rigid standards, to potentially shift perceptions held so tightly. But just as she began to sense hope, another board member interrupted, her skepticism piercing through Sarah's resolve. "You're advocating for an ideal, Miss Carter, but ideals often falter when scrutinized against actual performance and accountability. Are we prepared to compromise educational standards for creativity?" The insinuation cut deep. Doubts crept back in, gnawing just beneath her surface. Was she indeed set to challenge the very foundations of accountability within the system? Amidst the fortress of creativity she had erected, could she dismantle the walls that held rigid accountability intact? As the discussion intensified, the stakes grew higher. Sarah understood that the outcome of this exchange would plunge her deeper into the heart of the struggle she faced, a battle between creativity and conformity where belief and statistics collided. What would she be willing to sacrifice to maintain her values? In that pivotal moment, surrounded by the vibrant energy of her students and the hardened faces of the board, she steeled herself for the looming confrontation. The answer may redefine her path forward in ways she had yet to consider. And amid the mounting tension, the question arose. Would she fight to redefine the metrics of success in education, or would she surrender to the expectations that threatened to stifle her voice? As the discussion raged on, Sarah felt the weight of expectation suffocating her. She hadn't just engaged the board in a debate, she felt as if she had staked her entire career on the outcome of this confrontation. Doubt coiled like a snake in the pit of her stomach, but beneath its slithering presence lay a flicker of tenacity. The arguments were not only about educational standards, they were about redefining what it meant to educate. "Miss Carter," Mr. Thompson pressed, his gaze unyielding, "how can we justify adopting this approach without clear results? Metrics are what guide us in ensuring accountability, and without them, how can we ensure quality education?" His challenge reverberated as others nodded in agreement, their eyes scrutinizing Sarah as if waiting for her to unravel. In that moment, she felt the distinct chasm between her vision and their rigid definitions of success. To her, the very essence of education lay in its capacity to excite, to engage, and to nurture the unique capabilities of every student. But how could she transform that belief into a concrete argument? "Isn't it possible," she began slowly, weighing each word, "that the most valuable outcomes of an educational experience cannot entirely quantified? What if the ultimate goal is not just the immediate ability to score well on tests, but rather to cultivate lifelong learners who adapt and innovate in an ever-changing world?" For a brief moment, she captivated them. Their expressions shifted, revealing the tiniest hint of consideration. She pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "My students aren't just regurgitating information. They're employing critical thinking, problem-solving, and collaboration, all invaluable skills for the future. What if we began to redefine success not solely around performance metrics, but through authentic engagement and the passion these students demonstrate?" The flicker of hope in Sarah ignited a spark in others, too. A few board members exchanged fleeting glances, their cynicism slightly thawing. Still, the questioning didn't relent. A stern-faced woman inched her way into the dialogue, her voice cut through the room like a cold draft. "Passion does not pay the bills, Miss Carter. Enthusiasm is commendable, but it must be supported through proven efficacy. Without that, we risk the future of our educational integrity." The criticism stung, but rather than caving beneath the pressure, something shifted within Sarah. This was not merely about defending creative educational models. It was about becoming a voice for her students' ambitions, translating their fervor into a language that was comprehensible to those entrenched in numbers. "Then let us find a way to blend creativity with accountability," she suggested, her resolve hardening. "Allow me to develop a pilot program in which we track qualitative data alongside quantitative outcomes, all aimed at showcasing how creativity enhances learning. Let's marry the two instead of seeing them as incompatible." A murmur spread through the room as her proposal hung in the air, sensing the potential for a breakthrough. Could she indeed forge a new path, one where both creativity and accountability coexisted? Yet self-doubt lingered, a wolfish figure clawing at the edges of her resolve. "Your enthusiasm is appreciated, Mr. Carter," Mr. Thompson replied cautiously, "but implementing such changes takes considerable time and resources that are already stretched thin." His words knotted her stomach again, reminding Sarah of the constraints within which she operated. What if this was a useless endeavor that could cost her both credibility and job security? But beneath that dread lay an undeniable fire, the knowledge that she was shaping the future, one student at a time. The argument was heating up and moving toward its inexorable conclusion. Would she reiterate her commitment, pledging to find a middle ground, or would she retreat into the safety of conventionality, forsaking her vision and her students? As she prepared to respond, her thoughts crystallized. It was clear, the true challenge loomed larger than each board member's individual criticism. She was on the brink of deciding not just what kind of educator she would be, but what kind of legacy she would leave behind. The moment of truth had arrived, and as Sarah took a deep breath, she felt the walls of expectation closing around her. What would she be prepared to fight for? Would she risk everything for the chance to break through conventional barriers, or submit to the weight of long-standing traditions? As the board members leaned in, waiting for her answer, Sarah realized the real question was no longer about metrics. It was about the very foundation of her identity as an educator. In that profound stillness, she understood. The next words she spoke could either forge her path or shatter her dreams. But what if her answer led to unforeseen consequences, ones that even she had yet to fully comprehend? The silence enveloped Sarah like a shroud, amplifying the thunderous beating of her heart. She could sense the tension in the room tangling with the anticipation etched on each board member's face. In that instant, her earlier spark of transformation flickered precariously between hope and despair. The weight of every student whose potential hung in the balance descended upon her shoulders, urging her to break through the thick veil of doubt. "Let's initiate the pilot program," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Let us redefine success together. I recognize the challenges, and I'm fully committed to addressing them alongside our existing metrics. But first, we must be willing to unveil what true engagement looks like in our classrooms." Even as she spoke, a shard of vulnerability pricked at her resolve. Could she truly sustain the momentum she had just forged? This was not just about presenting a new idea. It was a commitment to a vision of teaching that could risk her standing. She could almost hear the cautionary voices whispering in the back of her mind. What if this backfires? "Interesting proposition," Mr. Thompson conceded, with a hint of skepticism replacing the earlier hostility. "But how do you expect the board to support a program without a clear budget or plan for resources? You may be visionary, but dreams need scaffolding." The challenge resonated, grounding Sarah's momentary euphoria. She realized she needed to equip herself not just with passion, but with a strategic plan. A fire flickered each time she envisioned her students immersed in learning, but she had also learned that enthusiasm had to be buttressed by concrete action and foresight. With determination igniting within her, Sarah began sketching ideas in her mind, objectives, timelines, success indicators, all crafted to illustrate the synergy between creativity and accountability. "I propose a 2-year period," she started, measuring the strength of her thoughts as she spoke, "during which we track both qualitative and quantitative data. We can conduct surveys to gauge student engagement, hold focus groups to collect feedback on projects, and continuously monitor academic performance. This approach allows us to evaluate the program comprehensively while transparency." The board exchanged looks, some leaning back in their chairs, their bodies relaxing ever so slightly, while others remained guarded. But there was something undeniable about the energy she felt shifting in the atmosphere. It was pivotal for her to maintain her composure and articulate her vision as a commitment to their collective integrity. "I vow to bring these insights to our meetings regularly, allowing us to refine our approach. The sooner we embark on this journey, the closer we will get to a future that honors the imaginative intelligence of our students while maintaining our core values of educational excellence." Her heartbeat steadied, the adrenaline morphing into clarity. The tension in the room transformed from scrutiny to contemplation. She could practically feel the gears of thought churning in the minds around her. Yet there remained a looming cloud of doubt. How would her peers truly react to this ambitious commitment? As discussions lingered, she felt a sliver of pride in standing her ground, but along with it, uncertainty began to seep deeper into her mind. What if the metrics revealed less than stellar results? What if the program didn't resonate as she hoped? The potential fallout of inadequacy lay heavy, threatening to overshadow the strides she still sought to make. The board members continued to deliberate, some skeptical, others cautiously supportive. Sarah's resolve sharpened. She was prepared to face whatever consequences emerged from this brave venture. With each second, she felt the weight of her aspirations wrestling against the confines of the system surrounding her. Taking a deep breath, she leaned into this moment, ready to grapple not only with the resistance of the board, but with her growing inner conflict. What changes would this engender in her own sense of competence and identity as an educator? As she braced herself for the board's response, a contraction of dread and exhilaration tightened in her chest. Would they believe enough to support her vision, or would they draw the blinds of tradition even tighter? What lay ahead could change everything, whether for better or worse was yet to be seen. The discussion continued, a tightrope of discourse stretching uncomfortably between hope and skepticism. Sarah listened intently, mentally pacing through the array of potential responses. Each board member had their own agenda, yet their concerns mirrored her internal turmoil. She could perceive the walls they had built around their traditional practices, the resilience of convention holding fast against the winds of innovation she was attempting to harness. Sarah, a board member named Miss Jenkins, interjected, breaking Sarah's rumination. How do you plan to ensure that all departments align with this new vision? Collaboration can often falter in schools. The question struck a chord, reverberating through Sarah's mind. It wasn't just about launching a program, it was about fostering a culture. But how? She had often felt torn between her role as an educator and her increasing aspirations as a leader. This moment wasn't just about advocating for her students, it was also a critical juncture in her own identity. She struggled with the vulnerability of leadership, teetering on the edge of self-doubt. Our success hinges on collective buy-in, she responded, attempting to ignore the tremor in her voice. I envision regular interdisciplinary meetings established around project planning. We create opportunities for teachers to innovate together. Her resolve strengthened as she spoke, picturing herself garnering support from faculty who might be resistant. Perhaps in sharing their own expertise and experiences, they might shift from being passive recipients to active participants. The prospect excited her, but it also instilled a fear of rejection. An intriguing thought, but what if those meetings yield no tangible results? What then? Mr. Thompson fired back, skepticism re-emerging in his tone. All too aware of the potential pitfalls, Sarah's mind began racing. Metrics, baseline measurements, assessments. She could almost see the spreadsheet materializing, outlining each necessary component. But she needed more than data. She required trust. Then I am prepared to reevaluate my approach, Sarah declared, a steely edge contributing to her previously wavering confidence. I'll foster accountability by bringing feedback from the field directly to the board. We must pivot according to the experiences of those on the ground. The affirmation buoyed her spirit. Taking ownership of the process might even show them her commitment to transparency. In that moment, she felt the walls of anxiety beginning to fragment, revealing a glimmer of possibility within herself she had yet to recognize. As the meeting came to a close, several board members expressed tentative support, but the lingering questions etched against their brows signaled that total agreement was still far off. However, Sarah understood now that this was only one battle in a larger war. She required a strategy not only for meeting metrics, but for fostering resilience among her colleagues. She sensed an urgency crystallized within her, one that pushed her to take decisive action. Once she left that cramped boardroom, Sarah began crafting a plan that involved more than flowcharts and timeframes. Could she engage mentors who had navigated similar transformations in their institutions? Could she establish a series of workshops to promote dialogue around curriculum changes? The possibilities ignited her fervor once again. Yet, shadows of doubt still flickered through her clarity. She knew well the risk of failure if initiatives fell short of expectations. The voice of self-doubt was relentless. Could she handle the scrutiny? Would she falter when it counted the most? Questions spiraled in her mind, but for the first time, they were accompanied by action. With every idea she jotted down, each potential meeting she visualized, a part of her emerged, stronger than before. She was on the cusp of redefining not just engagement, but her own identity as a devoted educator. Just then, a notification pinged on her phone, breaking the silence of her contemplations. It was a message from a fellow educator expressing concern over a recent student incident that rocked their school's morale. As the gravity of this unexpected challenge settled in, Sarah's determination surged. She would not allow fear to overshadow the mission she had set in motion. As she took a deep breath, the certainty returned, intertwined with apprehension. The time had come to face not only the board's resistance, but the realities of her educational community's challenges. Would she rise to the occasion, or be left grappling with the weight of missed opportunity? A new chapter was about to unfold, whether she was ready for it or not. In the weeks that followed Sarah's presentation, an undeniable shift began to percolate through the educational landscape of her school. She took the reins of her vision, launching the pilot program with an enthusiasm that resonated throughout the halls. The board had tentatively approved her plan, but that approval had ignited a fierce determination within her. She needed to prove the value of creativity integrated with accountability. Each day brought new challenges. Sarah worked tirelessly, gathering qualitative data from her students' projects, documenting their reflections, and integrating their feedback into every lesson. Jamie, the once distant student, thrived as a project leader, guiding his classmates with a passion that echoed Sarah's own revolutionary spirit. Together, they transformed the classroom into a hub of curiosity and exploration, pushing boundaries that had long confined educational creativity. She embraced collaborative meetings with fellow teachers, reigniting their passion for innovative teaching practices. The integration of interdisciplinary projects flourished. Science intertwined with history, art merged with music.
Mathematics. As Sarah showcased student successes in board meetings, the skepticism that had initially met her vision began to soften. Her evidence, real-time engagement metrics linked to overall performance, spoke volumes. Board members surprised her with positive feedback, even interest in expanding the program beyond her classroom. Recognition came slowly but surely. An external educational consulting group took notice of her work, reaching out to schedule an observation. "Your approach is pioneering," the evaluator remarked, as Sarah demonstrated how engagement was translating into measurable outcomes. Glistening test scores complemented their previously intangible enthusiasm, and she felt a swell of pride course through her. This was validation. It was the proof that she could marry creativity with accountability effectively. There was growth within her as well. Sarah learned to champion her philosophy, transforming her role from a compliant educator into a respected innovator. She demonstrated resilience in the face of criticism, fostering a network of support among her colleagues while maintaining her commitment to her students' passions. Faculty meetings sparked debates, but now they were filled with ideas rather than doubts, shifting the narrative around education to one of possibility rather than rigidity. Acceptance from the board became official when they voted unanimously to expand the program across the district. This decision marked a triumph not only for Sarah, but for the recalibration of educational paradigms that had once felt impenetrable. She had proven that educational integrity could envelop both creativity and rigorous standards. As she celebrated with her students who pinned their artworks on the walls adorned with accolades, Sarah's heart brimmed with fulfillment. They had embraced the journey together, transforming not merely into scholars, but into a tapestry of interconnected learners. She found herself standing before them, feeling a solid confidence that came from knowing she had accomplished what once felt impossible, transforming education in her own small corner of the world. This was her defining moment, not just as an educator, but as a leader with tangible achievements. Her growth allowed her to look toward the future. She envisioned workshops spearheading innovation in other schools, fostering creativity beyond the confines of her own environment. The fear that had crept in once lost its hold, replaced with a newfound thrill for the journey ahead. Sarah felt poised to take on the challenges of leadership that awaited, prepared to redefine the very landscape of education for generations yet to come. It was clear now. Embracing creativity, nurturing curiosity, and fostering an environment of exploration were vital to engage students meaningfully and ensuring they were prepared for a vivid world of opportunities. And now, as she reflected on how far she had come, she knew that embracing one's passion could conquer even the most entrenched traditions within a system. Remember, you need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire educators and leaders alike. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm because your support makes a world of a difference. Comment with your reactions, theories about
what Sarah's next step should be, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who also need to embrace their potential in education. Don't wait even one more second. This is the moment to show your support.